We're going to get the first talk by André Holzapfel from Boğaziçi University in Istanbul. And he's going to talk about style of Turkish master players on the rhythmic organization, on taksim improvisation. I hope I said it correctly. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yes, okay. As said, we are talking about Turkish music, in specific Turkish improvisation, and more specifically instrumental improvisation, which in Turkish music, or in Turkish art music to be specific, is referred to as taksim. So it's an improvisation in Turkish makam music. I hope that part of it is cut now here, but I think we can understand what the meaning is. The problem is that until now studies on taksim concentrated on aspects of melodic development, and that surface rhythm of this music is not related to an organized and continuous pulsation. So to say, there is no meter, but there's also no continuous pulse or whatever. Usually in these forms it is assumed that there is no such pulse. And then of course the interesting question is how in such music then rhythm is evolving, how, so to say, the prosody of that musical style works, and how can we analyze that? So what I did is I analyzed a collection of taksimler, which is the plural of taksim, played on the tambur, which is a plucked string instrument. Let me just try to give you an example. Sorry to interrupt, but you got at least the impression of maybe the prosody of the rhythm which is evolving here. This was a taksim by a very famous player, by Mesut Cemil. So I also collected players which are usually referred to as references by the current musicians. So, and okay, how to analyze then rhythm? What to do, what to look at. So I chose a very simple approach for the reason that I am also cooperating with musicologists, and I want to explain them what I'm doing in a simple way, and we are communicating about that, and I also show my results to musicians. So I wanted to keep it as simple as possible. So what I do is I just take the signal and I emphasize signal transients, which are caused by the right hand strokes, usually in tambur playing, and emphasize these signal transients just by having a look at the differences in time in the spectral magnitude of a short-time Fourier transform. So all these terminologies is already enough to make a musicologist dizzy. So I kept it here. I did not do anything more sophisticated, and what I do then is just I take this kind of transient emphasized signals and compute autocorrelations of that in short windows which have an overlap. The result of that you just can see here as an example. So I just have the time here on the x-axis, and I have the results of these windowed autocorrelations of these emphasized signals put together here as the columns of that matrix. This is a very simple artificial signal. It's just a series of noise bursts. Here in the first half of the signal, the noise bursts have a mutual distance of 0.6 seconds, and then the distance goes up to 0.75 seconds. And you can see that in such a simple signal I just get peaks at these mutual distances which are there in these signals. So what I will get from a music signal which has kind of a regular pulsation is that I will have something like yellow or red lines or points at places where a pulsation in time appears. For example, here I have the pulsation at 0.6 and also at the multiples, so I have something like red lines at these points. And the more stable that pulsation is, the more linear that line. So some music examples. On the left hand, there are there's a metered example, a composition of Turkish music, where we can see that here now this pulsation matrix, this is the same figure we saw before, but now for a music signal. It is characterized by a set of almost parallel green or yellow lines, which indicate that there are some pulsations evolving over time. So this is for a metered piece. And here we have the same thing for a taksim, for an unmetered piece. Still, we can see that also here, at some instances, there are clear pulsations happening, but they are not as consistent in their temporal development as they are here. Here you can see, for example, lines almost continuously developing. These red and black lines are just for confirmation of this effect. It is just a manual annotation and an automatic annotation, just as an example, where you can see that, for example, when I tap to that music, I coincide with those lines, which is not the case here for taksim. So it kind of confirms that there is a pulsation, a clear pulsation in metered pieces, but not in taksim. But still, there seems to be something, which we can see in these figures down here. These figures are simply taking that matrix and basically taking the average over time. So just taking each row of the matrix and taking the average, you get that here. You can see for a metered piece very clear structures, almost harmonic, which indicate, yes, there is a meter. This is not too astonishing. But for a taksim, still we have a set of very clear periodicities in that signal, which is interesting. I just play you the metered piece. I think I have it here. So this is this piece here. You see, for example, in the beginning now, it's a short improvised introduction. You can see that there is no pulsation in that very left part of the matrix, but soon now it will start. And you can also follow the temporal development. Now we have a slower tempo, and and towards the middle, it got a bit faster. So this representation is kind of usable apparently, and is usable also to communicate it with musicians and to show it to musicians. So the question is now for taksim, on the taksim side, what do these peaks tell us? Are they meaningful or not? Is it just something? Is it an artifact? What is that? So I tried to figure that out by using a data set of several players, 5 players, and I just used these simple vectors here in order to try to classify those players, to see, just having that vector, who is the closest vector among these 52 taksims, and I classify a piece according to what is the next neighbor using these vectors, using these profiles. And for some players it works extremely well, for some players it does not. So, for example, for Tamburi Cemil Bey, this player here, he seems to have pulsation profiles rhythmically that are very characteristic, because I can almost perfectly recognize his taksim using only these simple vectors, which, I mean, you listen to these files, I mean, it's just a collection of 50, 60 numbers. I mean, that does not represent anything of the richness of this music. But still, this very small representation seems to capture something in this player. But for other players, it does not. So this is in particular interesting because for this player, it does not work. But this is the son of this guy. So something changed here. Something changed here, or something, if it did not change, something is at least different between those two. It's a question if it's a change or if it's just a difference in their personal idioms. So let's have a look at that. We have down here, we have 2 example taksims of Mesut Cemil, and up here Tamburi Cemil. And it is extremely clear in most of his taksim, in Tamburi Cemil, that he establishes an almost continuous pulsation throughout large durations of his improvisations, which is not at all the case for Mesut Cemil Bey. Let me think. Yes, I have the examples. First, the example in the upper left, I think, and then again the Mesut Cemil Bey in the lower right. So this is so you can see that he kind of has a rhythmic, continuous phrase, which I kind of indicate here also with that white line, which is almost continuously increasing a little bit in tempo and does not break up. On the contrary, this is Mesut Cemil, where we don't observe such phenomena of continuity. And it's, at least for me, it's kind of, it's hard to confirm that just by listening or by notating it or by whatever. Even by studying it practically and playing it, you need so much time in order to get the melodic phrases first and then try to capture the prosody. So I believe that this representation kind of helps a little bit to indicate differences in ways. So my conclusions here are that in the absence of meter, the taksim represents a remarkable variety of prosodies that have not been documented yet. It will have to be established in the experiments if the measured pulsation indeed cause a tempo-like impression to musicians. It is quite clear that musicians they are clear that there is nothing like a meter in these things. But when asking them if they could think about a pulse in some pieces, they are not completely sure, not very negative. It's a bit fuzzy here. For this, a tapping experiment, I believe, is of little use. We tried that for metered pieces, and it's already quite a pain to make musicians, to put them into that situation, to tap to music, and they would for sure kind of reject that task in that music. Makes not much sense, I believe. But with that tool which we have, a combination of listening tests and expert interviews can indicate some interesting differences. For example, when speaking with my master about these differences I observed, he answered me that this might be related to Tamburi Cemil Bey, being influenced by a school of improvisers and players coming from the Balkan and more from violin instrument, which was something which was apparently rejected by other tambour players at that time. So because of that reason, Tamburi Cemil Bey, for example, might be an outlier at that time, which is confirmed by several sources of literature as well. Still, he's kind of the ultimate first person who recorded that music, and he's a goal for many players, but it's kind of known that he still is kind of an outlaw, or he was kind of an outlaw at that time. Okay, so how much time do I have? 2 minutes. So I have to go to one field work to participant observation. For that I'm going to go to a different slide. So when talking about taksim, these days you might have followed the news, and this is kind of a call for solidarity and for your participation into something which is very important and quite frightening, what is happening right now in Turkey. So in Turkey right now, a peaceful protest has evolved for preserving a park area in the center of Istanbul. This protest got bigger and bigger and remained peaceful. It's a protest rather of the non-conservative thinking people in Turkey, who might not be a majority, but still a number of people who deserve democratic rights and who demand them peacefully. However, the reaction of the police is not peaceful. We have a violent crackdown of the police, which is right now in Taksim under control because of the presence of international media. Where international media is absent, we face violence, we face death, we face police killing people. Until now, 2 people have been confirmed dead. Unofficial numbers are higher. The number of injuries is 2,500 at the point when I left Turkey. People are arrested from their homes after issuing tweets online about the political situation. And the police is going around with people not dressed as policemen. In this case, for example, this guy with a rod is a member of the governing party. This is confirmed. They walk around at night, and whomever they find who is not in a big group and looks like a protester, he has very bad luck. So I think the situation needs your support in whatever kind of ways. It needs international awareness. And I think the international community can show some power by enforcing media to show not only Taksim Square but the situation in general in Turkey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the talk. I find it a bit difficult after this to go back to the content of your presentation.
Well, I will just
there's some
switch back.
additional stuff to be said about that, but maybe let's
let's focus on that. We will certainly get in touch in the break.
Yeah.
So let's just get back to the music. And so are there any questions regarding the rhythmical structure or the patterning of the music master plans? Yes? Oh, you have to remove the plug, that's the problem. Okay.
Thank you. So just for my understanding, the vertical axis in your diagrams also shows time, right?
Yes, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, kind of. So what is the interpretations of these? It means seconds? What is the interpretation in these?
Just, I mean, I went through that maybe a bit too fast here, but I put this double axis here in order to make that clear. It's just like the autocorrelation captures some kind of repetition in time. If a piece repeats itself in time, let's say at 0.5 seconds, for example, you might say that's something like 120 BPM. So you can kind of interpret that as something rhythmical. That's
but so these legs are quite short, right? So what you're capturing is very local.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that's also for metered pieces. I observe that it, of course, you can take into account longer legs than these 2 seconds. But for the taksim, it does not make too much sense, as you see, for example, here. What is repeating are usually things which are below 0.5 seconds. So if you think about the playing, it is usually very fast notes which are repetitive. So it's not like a complete meter in the sense of an organized pulsation in various durations is constructed. It is more that there is something like a pulsation at quite a high frequency, so or a low duration.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Hello. Maybe one question with 2 elements. Have you considered the influence of language, and if that would have influenced how the rhythmical behavior of music is, and if it's rather a local phenomenon that you have rhythmical local elements?
Okay, for the first question, there is in interviews it's very often it appears very often that musicians refer to their playing resembling speech or something they tell, like a storytelling, a taksim being like telling something. Or for example, a teacher telling you when you learn some phrasing on your instrument, starting to say, okay, just play your name, for example, on your instrument. So there is some connection. The problem is now that I don't have any annotated interesting data of free speech or recited poems in Turkish language which would be in some way annotated, which I could use for comparison, which would be very interesting. But I'm on the way there. The other thing, it was about something like how much local is what I observe. Yeah, well, I mean that kind of shows that it is kind of local. The durations which are regular are very short. I mean the phrases are, for example, in a taksim, typically a phrase on a ney, on a wind instrument, is phrase length is given by the breath. But then, if there are sub-phrases and how to segment that, I think we will have a talk. Where's Olivier afterwards? So it's that's.
Okay, we have time for one more question or observation. Or?
The participant observation, yeah, if there's no other question.
Okay.
Okay. Being from Istanbul and having been on the streets, not just this past week, but for a couple of years, and having also been in demonstrations in different countries, I think I would like to change the perspective a little bit, because if you're, isolated to one country and so on, I think you miss another main point that has to get across, which is about legalized violence of states. And since 9/11, states legally use violence, so we know how the Occupy movement was taken out of that square. We know the police violence May 1st in Berlin, in Germany. And these things are very connected, so I prefer to, this should not be seen as, the dosages may be different, but these are highly connected to each other. So what I think is, rather than saying, oh, let's help the people in Turkey and we're all well off, just remember the Brazilian immigrant who was killed in the London metro, etc., etc. So there's a lot of police violence, and it has been legalized since 9/11 more and more. So we're more and more oppressed by police security, etc. And I think it applies to a lot of European countries, Western countries as well. So I think we should get together there. Okay.
Okay. Let's talk and thank our speaker once more. And.